I want to update you guys on all of the fast-moving efforts to fight the income tax since it was signed into law by Governor Ferguson yesterday. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Make sure you sign up for their newsletter to be alerted to opportunities to get involved. Okay, so there is a ton going on, and oh my gosh, it is going to be a really busy few months until November. I mean, think about it. It's already the midterm elections. Midterm elections are already very busy. There could be up to 4 initiatives. We know for sure there's going to be 2, but there could be 2 others on the ballot. There's like 5 state Supreme Court seats that are up for grabs, which is a majority of seats on the state Supreme Court. There is a ton going on. I know I'm forgetting stuff too, but there's a lot going on, and this income tax thing adds a lot of other activity over the summer. So very first thing after the income tax was signed into law, because signing it into law, you had to do that before any of the challenges or efforts to repeal it could begin. So we already know, we talked about this yesterday, the Citizen Action Defense Fund immediately announced it would be filing a lawsuit led by former State Attorney General Rob McKenna. And this is on the constitutional grounds. The income tax is blatantly unconstitutional. As you know, in our state, your income is considered your property, and you can't tax property in this fashion in Washington state unless you were to amend the Constitution, which they don't seem ready to do. So that is going to be more of a long-term thing. That could take a couple years for that to happen. But in the meantime, Let's Go Washington, led by Brian Haywood, announced something very interesting. They said that they are going to file a referendum to repeal the income tax on millionaires. You might think that's a little weird, but here's the statement from Brian Haywood. We're filing a referendum to repeal Governor Ferguson's unconstitutional income tax because, unlike King Bob, we believe that the framers of our state's constitution meant it when they wrote that all political power is inherent in the people. Now you might say, Brandi, but I thought we couldn't run a referendum on it. Because you'll remember that the tool that Democrats use constantly is they will attach an emergency clause onto the end of something, and if it's an emergency, then you can't repeal it via referendum. And why do they do that? Because it's much easier and much less expensive to run a referendum on a law than it is to run an initiative on a law. So Democrats have started to do this more and more often, where they'll just say, look, somebody's going to try to repeal this in a referendum, something controversial. Let's stick an emergency clause on it. And then they can't run a referendum. In this case, they added something similar, a necessity clause. So what is going to happen here? Well, this is clearly a strategic play by Let's Go Washington. They are going to file a referendum, and what will happen? The Secretary of State will refuse it because he'll say you can't run a referendum on this. It has a necessity clause. And then my guess is what's going to happen is they will immediately turn around and sue. So you'll have the different lawsuit over the income tax and the constitutionality, but then they will sue over this sort of abuse of the emergency clause, necessity clause that Democrats have abused in earnest for many, many years. And so they'll basically say, look, you're undermining the constitutional right of voters by putting a necessity clause or an emergency clause onto something simply to stop a referendum. So this is really genius. So now you've got the 2 prongs. You've got the long-term legal challenge. You've got the referendum that'll turn into a separate legal challenge. And then, of course, my phone has been off the hook. I've had people text me, when is there going to be an initiative? When can I sign an initiative? What is going on with this? So I think that there is going to be, you got to do these steps first. So the first thing they're going to do is this will be like an emergency hearing on the referendum when they sue. So that's going to play out first. But Let's Go Washington, if you look at their website right now, you've already got the ability to pre-order signature sheets. So clearly they're planning an initiative. Whether it's going to be in 2026 or 2027, I'm not sure. They might wait and see how the referendum thing goes. But you can already, it needs your first name, last name, phone number, address, and then you can request sheets. So as soon as they have an initiative, they'll mail out the sheets to you, and then they can collect signatures very, very quickly. So for people who have been asking me, when is this going down? I don't know for sure when it's going down, but I do know that Let's Go Washington is already in the early stages of planning for it. So we've got the constitutional legal challenge. We've got the referendum that is going to turn into a legal challenge. And then you have an initiative waiting in the wings. And then, of course, you have a lot of legislative seats that are up, that are going to be on the ballot in November. And you have those 5 state Supreme Court seats. So that really is a whole nother tentacle to this. Is you better believe that the people who are opposed to the income tax and the people who are in favor of the income tax are going to be spending a lot of money on those state Supreme Court seats. Probably more than any time in any election year in the history of Washington state, you're going to see ads for those things. They're going to spend big bucks trying to make sure that the court either stays with this very progressive majority, or on the other side, they're going to try to flip it to people who would rule against an income tax on the basis of constitutionality. So this is going to be one hell of a busy election cycle for sure. Our friends at Future 42, by the way, I just want to point this out. They started a new offshoot of their website. If you go to incometaxwashington.com, incometaxwashington.com, you can sign up for this newsletter. It says it'll send you clear, factual, timely information about the Washington proposed income tax, which is now law, of course. And so this is going to be specifically a website where they're going to have all sorts of stories, news stories, information, updates on what is happening with the income tax. So obviously, we also will keep you up to date, but that's a good place where it's all going to be, incometaxwashington.com, from our friends at Future 42.